everybody is a transport planner because everyone has an opinion on how they go to and from work or to and from school, or how they get about the weekends. Everyone has a view on traffic, the same as the weather. And so we all have a subconscious mind on what we prefer, what type of conditions we like to operate in. In my mind, we think about the cost of infrastructure and what that means for the taxpayer. But actually, the taxpayer is more interested in, well, what does this infrastructure do for me? And how is it going to make my life better?
Well, David, thanks for joining me today to have a chat.
You're very welcome. Pleased to be here.
I would like you just to do a bit of an intro about yourself. So what's your name, your title, the organization that you work for, and also what you are passionate about?
Oh, sure, I can do that. So my name is David Tucker. I'm the Chief of Project Advisory and Evaluation at Infrastructure Australia. So Infrastructure Australia is a Commonwealth government body, but we're an independent agency and we provide advice to the Commonwealth government on infrastructure matters, whether that's policy or infrastructure based. In my role, I have a focus on project advice and evaluating business cases for major infrastructure projects. And so one of my passion, I suppose, is about making good decisions, quite simply the right infrastructure at the right place at the right time, with a lens of the taxpayer and getting most value out of our taxpayer dollars. But just as important is for the community and getting value for the community out of the infrastructure that we build and service.
I was really curious about what are some of the highlights that you have from working at Infrastructure Australia?
So my background is in transport planning, transport modeling, traffic engineering, that sort of thing in consulting firms, and predominantly working in New South Wales. When I moved to Infrastructure Australia, obviously I moved from private sector to public, which was a great eye-opener and definitely a highlight going from consultant side to client side. But also being a national body, of course, it's across the country. So it's every state and territory, every geography, and it's cross-sectoral as well. So broader than just transport, our focus is also water, energy, and telecommunications. And therefore, it's just the pure variety that we get out of the job we do. I can be talking about a dam in Queensland, an hour later talking about a road project in Victoria, and then in the afternoon talking about a port in WA. Every single day is different, and I love that.
So it keeps you on your toes, is what it sounds like.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, I've also had the privilege to go on a number of site visits around the country, seeing outback, Northern Territory, the far north of Queensland, Western Australia as well. So just seeing a whole range of different types of infrastructure, whether it's roads or desalination plants or dams. Yeah, it's fascinating, and I've loved my 6 years almost at IA.
So on that variety, as part of your role, one of the things you do amongst a whole bunch of things is provide best practice guidance on those infrastructure projects. How has the Infrastructure Australia assessment framework evolved over your career? So what are some factors that are taken into account when you're improving this framework?
I think that's certainly one of the biggest achievements in my time at IA. So the assessment framework in itself has evolved over the years that IA has been in operation. I think it's fair to say that the assessment framework, when I came into the organization in 2018, it definitely best practice in terms of economic appraisal and the way that we were evaluating projects in an economic lens. What we did with the assessment framework in 2020 and then published in 2021 was take a much more holistic approach to the way that we think about infrastructure. So we now have three overarching themes. One is the strategic fit of our infrastructure project. So how does it align with government objectives and policy? How does it fit within the network or the community in which it's being constructed? Is it the right option? So really strategic, big picture kind of view of the infrastructure. And then the second criterion is around societal impact. So that's your traditional social, economic, environmental impacts. And we capture that through cost-benefit analysis, among others. But then also thinking about sustainability and resilience. So again, thinking about the impact, the value, the benefits of infrastructure in a holistic way. And then the third criterion is around deliverability. So what's the procurement strategy? How can you actually build this thing? Do we have the skills and the market to deliver it to the time and the cost that we're anticipating? What are the risks? What's the governance model? So we were thinking about these things in the previous iterations of the assessment framework, but it wasn't as explicit. And so what we did in the 2021 version was bring it to life and bring it together in a really easy to understand, practical manner so that it's of use to practitioners in developing submissions to us, but then also for use for us when we're assessing those proposals when we receive them.
So aside from doing all of that, you are also involved with the Institute of Transport and Logistics Studies, or ITLS, at the University of Sydney. In what capacity do you support ITLS?
So I was very fortunate to be invited to join the Board of Advice at the end of last year. The Board of Advice, as I've seen it, is about bringing a industry and a government lens into the academic ecosystem, so that both two-way, the academic can see what is of interest to us as governments, or what is of interest to our private sector advisory board members. But it's also then for us to be able to see what emerging kind of research and interest areas that the ITLS faculty are actually focusing on. And then hopefully we can bring those two worlds together and really get the best outcomes. So for me, I think it's sharing knowledge, it's gaining knowledge, but then it's also, frankly, building a network of other individuals who sit on the board.
It is like a very unique intersection between all the things that people would like to play nicely together, as in public, private, and research.
Yeah, absolutely. From our perspective, this is at IA, this is actually something that we started last year with other universities. As I said, we published our assessment framework, but we never see that as just, okay, it's done and we walk away and then let's look at it again in a few years' time. It's a continuous improvement piece for us, where we constantly want to recognize what good practice or best practice looks like. And whether that's something that we embed in the framework or whether that's something we reference to work that's been done by others, I think we've got scope both ways. And so we actually used our connections with some other universities to flag some of our personal interest areas and study topics. Some of those have been taken up by master students, and hopefully that's something that we can also see happening with ITLS.
It's good because it would keep it dynamic, right? I think when people think infrastructure and they think government, they probably don't think dynamic and constantly iterating.
That's right. And from the Commonwealth government's point of view, they make a lot of investment to major infrastructure around the country, and there is a real desire and passion for the current government to make sure that money is being directed into the right places, and that they can use their influence as an investment partner to really get most value and benefit out of that investment. So we're happy to be supporting them on that journey and hopefully drive great decisions on the right projects in the right places.
You might have already answered this question, but the next one is, in your opinion, what do you think makes the ITLS and its advisory board unique?
Yeah, I think it's the diversity from what I've seen so far, and some really, really expert, highly experienced individuals who are bringing different perspectives, whether that's from a logistics and operational or supply chain perspective to financial to commercial. So a whole range of really diverse perspectives. As I say, it's a great learning opportunity for me just to build that network and then to really see some of the innovation that's coming through from the academics as well, and then think about, okay, how can we use this in our infrastructure projects, or in my case, how might this actually improve the way that we think about evaluating infrastructure projects? So yeah, it's certainly unique because I think just the sheer amount of expertise and as we said earlier, then bringing the academic and the private public sectors all together into a really collegiate environment, I think it's great to be part of.
Looking to the future, what do you
Mhm.
see as the biggest challenges for infrastructure, particularly within your role?
Well, look, I think immediately right now, skills is a big thing for infrastructure. We know, and just general capacity of the market, skills and materials. So we've seen that, particularly through the pandemic, there was a lot of pressure on our ability to service our construction sites, and we're still seeing that. And I think there was really great will by governments to invest in infrastructure to stimulate the economy, but that's then put pressure on us to be able to deliver. So there is absolutely a challenge for us to ensure that we're geared up to deliver. And that's a long-term game in terms of through school and education to bring people into the sector from an early age. But then it's also about culture on work sites to ensure that people want to stay in the industry once they're in it. And then from my perspective, it's also about, as I say, the value. So unfortunately, what we've seen with those circumstances is the cost to deliver infrastructure has gone up. Traditional cost benefit analysis is proving more and more difficult because the costs are going up, but the benefits are still staying the same. So it's thinking about smarter ways where we can demonstrate the real value that we're getting out of infrastructure. And the other big challenge, of course, in my mind, is climate change and resilience of infrastructure, but then also our targets regarding emissions reduction or reduction, hopefully. So how do we ensure that we're developing the right infrastructure that's being mindful of our emissions reduction targets? And then more broadly than that, it's just environment, thinking about not only lower emissions through construction, but then also the right materials to have ongoing emission savings throughout. And lower emitting materials will also have a sustainability benefit and a longer term environmental benefit as well as emissions reduction. We're becoming more and more aware of just how big some of these projects are and the impact that they have throughout the economy. And therefore, just not only the economic, but of course the social and the environmental elements that go alongside it.
It does sound probably a lot more multifaceted than what people might realize just looking at the surface of what Infrastructure Australia does.
Oh, absolutely. And, I used to, as I said earlier, I used to be in transport planning, and everybody is a transport planner because everyone has an opinion on how they go to and from work or to and from school, or how they get about at the weekends. Everyone has a view on traffic, the same as the weather. And so we all have a subconscious mind on what we prefer, what type of conditions we like to operate in. In my mind, we think about the cost of infrastructure and what that means for the taxpayer. But actually, the taxpayer is more interested in, well, what does this infrastructure do for me? And how is it going to make my life better? No one likes to think of cost blowouts and that sort of thing. But ultimately, if the infrastructure is going to save them time, a better quality of life, then they think less about the actual costs. So, yeah, it's probably one of those things that subconsciously we're all very aware of, but we perhaps don't talk about it as much as we might.
I do like that everyone's a bit of a traffic engineer at heart. My last question, If people wanted to learn more about Infrastructure Australia and what it does, or if they wanted to maybe connect with you, where would they be able to go to find out more?
Look, our website, we try to publish as much as we can, and that is part of our role about being really transparent. Our remit is about bringing transparency and awareness of major infrastructure projects or major policy reforms. So our website has a wealth of information in terms of the actual products that we've produced over multiple years, the assessments we've undertaken of major projects. Yeah, I think that it gives everything an interested person would want to see on there. So we've done some great work over the last couple of years on market capacity, and in building a data set and telling a story around how we are able to deliver infrastructure in the current environment. My team is responsible for a product that's called the Infrastructure Priority List, and that's about identifying infrastructure needs and opportunities around the country which are seeking investment. Yeah, that's all on our website, and quite an interesting look and feel of different geographies, different infrastructure types.
Perfect. I'll chuck that in the show notes as well. Well, David, thanks so much for your time today and for chatting through and providing probably a little bit of a peek underneath the veil of Infrastructure Australia, and a little bit more insight into kind of what you guys do, and that it's actually a little bit more dynamic than what people might think.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
If you'd like to learn more about any of the guests that we have on the podcast, more about Byte Size, or more about Compass IoT, the company that produces this podcast, you can visit our website, which is www.compassiot.com.au. Until next time.